Hello everyone, in the previous video we set up our Postgres database and integrated it with our Django project. Today we'll start by creating our database tables, populating the database with our player data from a JSON file, and finally writing our first API endpoints. For those who are not aware, Django has a built-in ORM or Object Relational Mapper that allows us to write SQL commands in an object-oriented way. That means we'll be able to define our tables as classes, commonly known as models, and fields which represent columns in the database. So we're going to create our first model, which will be for our players application, and it's going to follow the structure of our JSON file. So we are going to have our ID, which will also act as our primary key. We'll also have our name, the age, jersey number, place of birth flag, which will be our URL in this case. We're going to have the date of birth, which will be a datetime field, the height, the foot, the citizenship. Notice that the citizenship is a list. Citizenship flag will also be a list, or in some cases just one element. We'll also have our agency info, the club stats. Notice the structure of the club stats. This will be a JSON field. We'll also need the JSON team stats, the current season stats, and the rest of the profile data. So to start off, we are going to create our first model. So class player, this will be our player model. Should inherit from models dot model. So we'll have our ID, which will be an integer field. So models dot integer field. I'm going to set it as our primary key. True. Let me just open it across. The next column should be a name. That should be a character field. I'm going to give it a max length to 50. Also have the age, which will be an integer field. Some players in our data might miss the age field, so we are going to set that to null in case it's empty. So null true. The jersey number will also be an integer field, so models dot integer field. It's going to be the same as our age field. We'll also have the place of birth. This will be the same as the name. You can just copy that. We'll also need the place of birth title. This will be the same as the place of birth, just above it. Some players might miss this, so I'm going to set it to null true, in case they are missing them. So now it's also to true. Place of birth flag. Place of birth flag. This will be a URL field. Models.url field. We'll also have the date of birth. This will be a date field. Models.date field. It can also be null. Also have the height. The height should be a float field, models dot float field. It can be null. We also have the foot. This should be a character field. It can also be null. Max length. Doesn't need to be 30. You can just put 10. Null is equals to true. We'll also need the citizenship column. You can see that sometimes we have players with more than one citizenship. For example, Messi has the citizenship of Argentina and Spain. And for some players, they only have one citizenship. For example, this one has just one citizenship of Nigeria. In this case, I'm going to use the JSON field. So citizenship models.json field. This can also be null sometimes. We'll also need the citizenship flag. This is going to be the same as citizenship. We'll also have the headshot. The headshot is simply which is simply the player's profile picture. It will be a URL field, so headshot models dot URL field. It can also be null. We'll also have the club. Every player must have a club, so that shouldn't be null. So models dot character field. I'm just going to give it a max length 100. We'll have the club logo. This will be a URL field, models dot URL field. This can be null, max length. We'll also have the main position, models dot character field. And we'll also have the other positions. This is also a list, models dot JSON field. Now, true. We'll also have the national team, which will be a character field too. So national team, models dot character field. National team flag, the caps, that should be an integer field. International goals, that should be an integer field. Can also include the market value, which will also be an integer field. Then we can have the league name, which will be a character field. It can also be null. Can also have the league level. Can also have the league logo. There should be a URL field. Then you can include the join date. This will be a date time field. You can also include the contract expires. That will be the same as the join date. There we go. You can have the agency info. This will be a JSON field. Can also be null. Can also include the club stats. This will be the same as the agency info. To that, you can have the national team stats. This will be the models dot JSON field. We can also include the current season stats. So that's it. We have our models correctly. All columns are correctly defined. Now all that's left to do is to make our migrations so that it can create our database schema. And the database will be ready for, after that, the database will be ready for population. So I'm just going to open our terminal. then use the manage.py file to make our migrations. So Python manage.py file, make migrations. But before you make our migrations, it's always good practice in any database table to create indexes. This will just make our database queries more fast, and it will improve our database performance. So to create a database index in Django, it's just as simple as using the class meta. And in this case, we can define our indexes. This will be a list, models.index. We'll have the fields. This will be a list. I'm going to use the ID as our index. The market value. So I'm going to use the ID and the market value as our. So that's it. Now we can run our migrations. So Python manage.py, make migrations. And you can see the output. It says that migrations for player in this directory. So we can look at the migrations and our migrations directory inside the players file. And this is it. So this is the SQL that is going to execute. So after making your migrations, we can migrate. So Python manage.py migrate. So that's done. Django comes with an admin panel that we can use to interact with our database. We can see this practically when we navigate to the admin URL. So first of all, let's just run our server, Python manage.py, run server. So we can go to the default URL. So this is it. If we navigate to the admin page, we can log in with our username and password. This won't work at the moment because we don't have any user created or admin created. So in this step, we're going to create our admin. So I'm just going to stop the server. See? So Python manage.py create super user. So I'm just going to leave it blank to leave my username as Byron. Email address byron@gmail.com. Password, I'm just going to leave it as testing321. Testing321. Super user created successfully. So we can now navigate to that page. Let's run the server. Reload. The username is Byron. Password testing321. Login. So you can see we have our users and groups. If you navigate to the users, you can see that we have our username, the email address, we have the last login, date joined, and all these attributes. From this, we can also add our user. For example, in this case, you can create a new user and give them a username of, let's say, testing user. Testing user, password. Let's give them a password. You can give it any password you wish. That should save it. So if you go back to your user, you'll find that the user has been added. Now we can also do the same for our players database. But as you can see in our listings, our players database hasn't been listed. To register our players database in the admin panel, it's as simple as going to the admin.py file in our players directory. Once you are inside there, you can import our players model. So parent directory dot models, import player. Then to register our models, just as simple as admin dot site dot register player. So with those changes, let me refresh my server. We can reload our admin site, and you can see we have our players database listed. But at the moment we have 0 players. We are going to fix that in a while. So at this point, I want us to populate our database with our JSON data. I have my players data over here. It's too huge, so I cannot open it at the moment. I'll share with you part of this data, about 152 players. Personally, I'm using the updated full data, which is around 166,000 players. If you want access to this data, I'll put a link in the description of how you can get it. So I'm going to write a custom command to populate our database using our JSON file. The command is going to look something like python manage.py load JSON data. I want a command that's going to behave like that. And to write a custom command in Django, we follow some steps. So as you can see, according to the documentation, it's just as simple as creating in your app directory, you create a management directory. Inside there, you create an init.py file just to make the whole thing module. Then after that, you create a commands directory, then followed by an init directory, then the file which will use to run your commands. So let's follow those steps to create our custom command. So inside our players directory or application, we create a folder called management. Inside the manage directory, we create an init file, init.py file. Then we create another directory called commands. Inside the commands directory, we also create another init file. This will structure our directory as a module. So init.py file. Then we can now create our script. So I'm going to call it load JSON data.py. So we've created a management directory. Inside there, we created our init.py file. Then we created a commands file, a commands directory. Inside there, you create an init.py file. Then we create our file, which we are going to write our logic to populate our players database. Now, once this is ready, we'll be able to run a custom command such as python manage.py file load JSON data. It's as simple as that. So we can start by importing JSON, importing our players model. So from players dot models import player. Then we're also going to import Django's base command class that our new class will inherit from. So from Django.core.management.base import base command. So class command, it will inherit from base command. We're going to overwrite the help function, the help attribute I mean. Load data from JSON file. So now we can start writing our logic. We are going to overwrite the function handle. This will be responsible for running our commands. Self, it will take args as an argument, and also quags. So we are reading our data from a JSON file with open. I'm just going to copy the path of my JSON file. So copy path. I'm going to open it in read mode as file. Then player data is equals to JSON.load file. Then for every player in player data, I'm going to create my players. So player dot objects dot create player. So with this logic, Python will load our JSON data from the JSON file. Then iterate through every player in the or every row in the JSON data and create our rows. But this will not work at the moment because from our model file we defined our date of birth, our contract expires, and JSON data as date field objects. But in our JSON file, these elements are listed as strings. So we need a way to pass the strings into datetime objects. So for that, I'm going to write a function to handle this. First of all, I'm going to import the datetime object. So from datetime, import datetime. Then start by writing the function. So def pass date. It's going to take a date string. So we are going to check if the date string is null or not. So if date string try return datetime dot strip time. It's going to, the first argument is the date string. So date string, and we are going to pass the formatted string. The first one should be, let me just copy a sample datetime string. We have this. Let's take date of birth for example. So you want to pass this string into a datetime object. The first element is the month, which will be represented as %b. The second element is the date, which will be represented as %d, followed by the year, which will be %year. Now I got these formatters from this page. You can see that the %b represents the abbreviated month name, which is similar to our case. Then we had the %d, which is the day of the month as a 0 padded decimal, and also the year, which in our case should be this one, year with century as a decimal number, which is simply the full year. This is the programming's website. I'm going to put this link in the description. So that should return a datetime object. If it gets an error, we're just going to return none. Also, if the date string is null, we are going to return none. So we have our function. This function will be able to pass our dates, so we can then proceed. So player, the date of birth should be equal to pass date, which is our function, player dot get date of birth. And we can do the same for the contract expires. So I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to copy this, Control C. Contract expires, contract expires. And also the join date. So player joined date is equals to this will be very similar to the above, so I'm going to copy that, join date, and yeah, that should work. After this is done, we are going to print some success feedback to just indicate that it ran correctly. So for that we do self dot standard out dot write, and here you can just pass our message. So self dot style, I'm going to give it a success style dot success, and say data loaded successfully, and that's it. We are ready. I'm going to open the terminal and try to run that. So Python manage.py load JSON data. That is going to run and create our objects in the database. Mine is going to take a while because the data is quite huge. Yours is going to take a shorter time. So that has run well on my end. It took about 5 minutes to complete, and you can see it as I put in our message, which is that it ran well. Our data was loaded successfully, and now we can be able to see it in our admin page. So we can do that by running our server Python manage.py run server. If we refresh our database, you can see we have it. I have around 167 players, but you can see our player objects are not very descriptive. I would ideally like to print the player name and the player ID. So we can do this by using a string data method in our player model. So def string, I'm going to return an f string of self dot name and the ID, which is self dot ID. So my server is still running correctly. Let's refresh our admin panel, and voila, we have it. So in the next tutorial, we are going to see how you can customize the admin panel. And ideally, I would like to sort this page by the player's market value and the caps. So players like Jude Bellingham, Foden should come at the top instead of the little known players. Like this one has an age of 17, and I'm sure the market value is quite low. You can see the league name is under 17, league level youth league. So in the next tutorial, we are going to see how we can customize the admin panel and also create some endpoints. So that's it for this one. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching.